Hello and welcome back to algebra class. Today we're going to talk about ratios and proportions. So our objective today is to be able to determine if two ratios form a proportion and to solve those proportions. A ratio is a comparison of two numbers by division. Here we have three different ways to represent a ratio. We can say x to y, x colon y, or x divided by y. That's three different ways to represent a ratio. Proportions are an equation stating that two ratios are equal. If two fractions form a proportion, then the following has to be true. A over B equals C over D if A times D equals B times C. A really good way I like to think about that is I call it the butterfly method, where basically you say A times D has to be equal to B times C. Determine whether each pair of ratios forms a proportion. So we're going to use that exact butterfly method. So we're going to say 4 times 30. So we have 4 times 30 has to equal 8 times 15. Now, using our calculator, we can test this out. So we say 4 times 30 is 120. And then we have 8 times 15, which is 120. So we would say that that works. So we would say that this is a proportion. Let's try it with our next problem here. So we do 15 times 42, and then we're going to go ahead and do 36 times 35. So this time, 15 times 42 equals 630. And we go ahead and do 36 times 35, which equals 1,260. Those are not equal to each other, so we would say not a proportion. Also put a slash right through the equal sign showing that they are not equal to each other. Let's look at our next problems here. So now I'm telling you it's a proportion, and we have to be able to solve it from there. So the first thing I like to do, go ahead and put an equal sign, then we're going to just cross multiply like we know how to do. R times 40 is going to be 40R. And then 8 times 25 is going to be 200. Now, all I have to do is actually solve this thing out. So I'll draw a line right down my equal sign. And then I know that I have to divide both sides by 40. On the left side, I'm left with R. 200 divided by 40 is going to give me 5. So R has to be equal to 5. I do the same thing on the next problem. 3.2 times n is going to be 3.2n equals 4 times 2.6. I don't actually know that off the top of my head, so I'm going to go ahead and say 4 times 2.6. That is 10.4. Okay. Draw a line down my equal sign. Divide both sides by 3.2. I'm left with n equals and then 10.4 divided by 3.2 is 3.25. Let's look at our next problem. This one looks a lot more difficult, but it's really the same exact process. We still cross multiply just like we did before. So it's going to be 5 times x plus 2 equals 3 times 6, which is pretty easy to do. That's going to be 18. Now I simply just have to solve this equation out, just like I know how to do. So my first step is to distribute that 5. When I do that, I get 5x plus 10 equals 18. Next up, I'm going to subtract 10 on both sides. So I get 5x equals 8. Divide both sides by 5. So I get x equals and when I do this, I don't actually know 8 divided by 5, so I'm going to go ahead and say 8 divided by 5. It's a decimal, so I'm going to press math on the upper left-hand side. Enter, enter. So it is just 8 over 5. Let's try our next one. So here I have 9 times y plus 5 equals 12 times 10 is going to be 120. Draw a line down my equal sign. Next thing I'm going to do is do my distribution here. 9 times y is going to be 9y. 9 plus 5 is going to be 45. Still equals 120. I'm going to subtract 45 on both sides. On the left side, I'm left with 9y. 120 minus 45 is 75. Divide both sides by 9. I'm left with y on the left side. 75 divided by 9 is going to be 8.33. I can press math, enter, enter to get that fraction, so it's 25 thirds. Let's go ahead and try our next problem. It says Trent goes on a 30-mile bike ride every Saturday. He rides the distance in 4 hours. At this rate, how far can he ride in 6 hours? So my first thing I'm asking myself is, what is the question actually being asked? It says, how far can he ride in 6 hours? And I don't know how far he can ride, so that's what we're going to be trying to figure out. However, I know that we have some information in this problem. The first thing, I see 30 miles And I don't see anything else, any other actual distances, so I'm just going to leave that for now. But I do have 4 hours right here, and I also have 6 hours right here. So for this problem, I always like to set it up. I have miles and I have hours. So I'm always just going to say miles have to be over my hours. Then I'm going to set up a little proportion. Now, for the first thing, I noticed he went 30 miles because miles has to be on top based off what I just told you. And that took him 4 hours to do that. I do not know how far he can ride, so we'll say D for distance here. But I do know that he's going to be going 6 hours. That is how I set up my proportion. That is not the only way to set up a proportion, but in my opinion, that's the easiest way. Now, all I have to do is solve this thing out. So I have 30 times 6, which is going to be 180, equals 4 times D, which is going to be 4D. My next step, I am simply going to divide both sides by 4. Pulling out my calculator. 180 divided by 4 is 45 equals D. So how far can you ride in 6 hours? You can ride 45 miles. Let's go ahead and look at our next problem. And actually our last problem, it says Scarlett earned $400 in 15 hours. At the same rate, how long will it take her to make $925? So first thing, I have $400. I also have another amount of money. It's $925. And then I have 15 hours, and I want to know how long it will take her to make that $925. So how long? I do not know that length right now. But in this case, I'm going to say money over hours, and that's how I'm going to set up my proportion. So the first situation, it's going to be like so. I have 400 over that 15 hours. Money has to go on top, so the 925 has to go here. And then I don't know how long that's going to take, so I'm just going to put H for hours. All I have to do now is cross multiply. So I have 400 times H. It's going to be 400H equals 925 times 15, which I have no idea what that is, so let's go ahead and figure that out. So it's 13,875. So it's 13,875. My next step is going to be to divide both sides by 400. And I'm left with H equals, so I'm going to take that 13,875 divided by 400. That's going to equal 34.69. Rounded to the nearest hours, we will round that up to 35 hours. That's it for this lesson. Have a great rest of your day.